There is news and there is updates in the weird and wacky world that is the one that F's. Mini DRS has reared its ugly head again. Red Bull protesting at the hands of Ferrari, so too McLaren. There's Concord Agreement, but we're going to have to leave that tomorrow. Concord Agreement, by the way, has been signed, but there are ramifications downstream for the FIA, or more pertinently, the one they call Mohammed Ben Sulayem. So too, we need to talk about Frederick Vasseur. So too, we need to talk about McLaren team orders. Now we get ourselves the transcript of what was said to Oscar J. Piastri and what it might mean for McLaren going forward. So too, we'll talk about the one that they call Lando Norris and how he destroyed his old mate, the one that they call King George Russell of Kingsley in Norfolk. Let's talk about this mini DRS for a second, because for the avoidance of doubt, the context is as follows. Last year, it was FlexiWing, both at the front and the back. Mini DRS is what McLaren MCL38 leveraged to beat one Charles Leclerc, aka modern-day Jean Alesi, around Baku, was it not? We looked at that in real time and said, you know what, OJ Piastri is the next one. Ayrton Senna settings, Alain Prost. That has to be it, right? How else could he hold off Charles Leclerc towards the latter stages of that Baku Grand Prix? A fire-breathing dragon, if ever you've seen one of a peddler. And then we come to find out the onboard pictures looking back at the rear wing of the McLaren of one Oscar J. Piastri shows that they were doing something weird. Mini DRS is only meant to be open when you're in the DRS zone. OJ Piastri went the second half of that race in the lead with no one in front of him. So then why was his DRS doing one of these? Not a full DRS open, but just a mini one, hence the moniker Mini DRS. Red Bull came into this season saying, we're not having that. We're going to normalise for all of these bloody behaviours. We're going to protest last year because we didn't have the financial resources without infringing upon the cost cap to develop ourselves a bespoke rear wing with mini DRS, not a flexi wing at the front. Some argue that that's the alter at which McLaren was able to win itself a championship of the constructors variety. Fast forward to 2025. Of course, Red Bull have spent the last 3 months building a flexi wing of the front variety and mini DRS at the back. Apparently not, chat. Apparently not, but McLaren have. Here's where I need to get out some bloody footage so you guys can see. Roll clip number 1, please, Cameron. Slot gap settings. You can see on the left hand side, that's the McLaren rear wing at the Australian Grand Prix this weekend past. It's not a mini DRS, not in the same one that they leveraged at Baku last year, but on the right hand side of your screen, you can see what Red Bull are working with. I would argue, therefore, that the slot gap of the Bulls that are red is much less of consequence as versus the McLaren. Ergo, there is durable competitive advantage, is there not, in whatever McLaren have there, because their slot gap is bigger. If we take it to brass tacks, DRS works because as soon as you have a gap opening, all of a sudden you sheath all of that downforce. Again, you want this car to be super downforcey in the corners, but you want to get rid of the downforce on the straights. That's what this mini DRS thing, aka slot gap, is saying. However, what's happened between now and the end of the Australian Grand Prix this weekend past is that the FI have done what they should have done pre-season, and they've taken a look at it, and now they want to boss up. Now they want to get robust and get their arms around the bloody mini DRS test. What are we doing here? I mean, the FIA are going to FIA, right? This is regulatory capture, proper ad infinitum. But here's what they've said. Let me read out the statements for you. At the Chinese Grand Prix, a new technical directive will be implemented. The gap between the main plane and wings will be no more than 0.5 millimeters as compared to the 2 millimeters. That's 2 centimeters. 2 millimeters? No, it's not 2 centimeters. What are you talking about, Cameron? 2 millimeters currently allowed. There is no way that McLaren on the left, that slot gap is not 2 millimeters. I don't care what anybody wants to say. And of course, that means, therefore, that McLaren are leveraging, no, accessing durable competitive advantage in the size of their slot gap. This statement reads, the FIA will introduce a new technical directive to reduce the effect of mini DRS after what was seen at the Australian Grand Prix. Article 3.15.17 will be updated, i.e. the test linked to the slot gap between the main plane and the mobile wing, which must not be greater than 0.5 millimeters when a load of 750 newtons is applied to the wing tips when the car is stationary, compared to the 2 millimeters allowed up to Australia. Honestly, it's a joke. It is absolute chaos here. Another statement reads that other teams, Red Bull in particular, accuse Ferrari and McLaren about the mini DRS system that allows the wing to let air out between the two rear wing profiles. But Ferrari stated that they do not fear any irregularities with their rear wing. Only regular legality checks took place in Bahrain, and they will continue as usual at the Australian Grand Prix. This is just ridiculous, honestly. I can't with the FIA anymore. I lack the emotional bandwidth, notwithstanding desire to go scorched earth. What else would you expect at this stage, ladies and gents of the F1 jury? I mean, are they even allowed to use scissors? Let alone get their hands around this very complicated rule and reg set and institute for it in a way that's consistent across all regulatory parties. What are we doing here? They said last year, Tom Biasis, FIA bod, that they didn't need to amend for the load test, that they were happy with what they saw. And then they saw Baku and the bloody rear-facing cameras that zoomed in on Oscar Jack Piastri's rear wing. And they said, hang on, no, about turn. Listen, cancel everything that we said before. We're going to amend for the load test. Now they're doing it again. Remind me, I thought that they had 3 months to get their arms around this. I thought that they were collaborating now with the teams, understanding the line of travel and the trees as far as development and design philosophy up which they were barking. Apparently not. The FIA, Barack, Marie, Geo22 are going to do what the FIA do. And here's my worry again. So let me state for the avoidance of doubt. I say all this to say this. My concern is that if we get a close championship in 2025, the FIA do just as they did in 2021 and open up that polemic and controversy door by dint of their consistent incompetence. This is nonsense. This is absolutely nonsense, and it's absolutely out of order, not commensurate, fit for purpose for the billion-dollar entity and sporting endeavour that we call Formula One. Let me tell you about this very quickly again, because Lando Norris and McLaren, it's going to get techie going forward. Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna settings, 89, 88 and 1990 incoming. Those two bods are going to fight. I'm telling you, it's only a matter of time. That driver hierarchy rancor is never, ever late, particularly when you have two drivers in Oscar and Lando who both want the same thing. Oscar now is a fire-breathing dragon in his 3rd season, and he will want that driver's championship. He doesn't want this failure tag to hang around. It is a stench. Oscar will not want it. Here's the transcription of what happened at the Australian Grand Prix, because the keen-eyed amongst you will have spotted that the guys and girls over at McLaren, the papaya coloured team, Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, were quick now all of a sudden to leverage team orders. Hold station, Oscar. Only for Oscar to drop back at the altar of a cheeky mistake, and then they told him, you are free to race. Here's what happened. Joseph, Lando Norris's race engineer, said, don't worry about Oscar right now. We're going to clear the back markers and then make the transition. At the same time, Stollard, Oscar Piastri's bod, was saying, Oscar, we should hold position, please. Hold position. Transition to the dry. Clear the back markers. Next one is Ocon. Piastri says, okay, but I'm faster. The response comes, Stallard says, yes, but hold for now. Let us know your pace. Piastri then responds, are we holding still now that we've cleared the traffic? Oscar Piastri was not having it. You can almost hear and see him seething through those messages. And again, there's another transcription, another piece of dialogue. Stallard responds to the one that they call Lando Norris. Okay, Oscar, we're free to race now. You know the rules. Weather update, lap 43, could be more rain, heavier rain possible, no rain until lap 43. That's what Stollard told to Oscar. But of course, that was after he made the bloody mistake. Of course, they're going to tell him he's free to race now because he can't race. There's a material gap between him and his teammate. Yeah, free to race. Clever and crafty from the papaya coloured team and their race engineer. Joseph now says to Lando Norris, after the gap between you and Oscar is 3.4 seconds. Both of you are now free to race each other. Free to race each other. Oh, the humanity. Of course you're free to race each other now that there's a bloody gap between you. Now, look. Pragmatism is something that McLaren lacked last year, and some will argue that Lando Norris's championship campaign of the driver's variety was sacrificed at that altar. That all of the mistakes came about by dint of their indecision, lacking in team orders, lacking clarity as far as driver hierarchy, lacking so too in singularity of focus, and you need nothing if not that to win yourself 25 points and definitely to win yourself a driver's championship. However, going into 2025, it looks like they've sorted for it, but that will always come with haters. The F1 community now says, oh, the humanity, what are we doing? How are you destroying our viewing pleasure because of pragmatism, desperately trying to win yourself some races? We say this about Lando as well. As brilliant as Lando 2.0 was during the Australian Grand Prix, people are being riled up by him. The receipts are there. The internet's undefeated, undisputed. You can go and see them. Lest we forget Lando Norris having conversations with one Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, back in the day, saying, mate, you've got the quickest car. You should win every race in the quickest car. Now, however, that Lando has the quickest car, his tune has changed. He said at the press conference post the Australian Grand Prix that, yeah, I've got the quickest car, but it's not just about the quickest car. Well, you weren't saying that back then, were you, Lando Norris? There was once a man called Hippocrates. Listen, I think Lando's a nice guy. I think he's a really, really good guy. Comes across like that before the world's press and media. But then there is inconsistencies in the suppositions depending upon the timelines. Back then, it was all about the car. Now that you have the car, Lando, you want to say there are plot lines. There are other things that you need to pick at and understand. Oh, and by the way, final topic on the docket. You guys need to hear this. Again, at the press conference, Lando now emboldened by the fact that he can hold off a fire-breathing dragon in Max Verstappen. You were always going to get some quotables. It was interesting to see the dynamic between Max, Lando and King George Russell of Kings Lynn North, and in the Kings Lynn Norfolk, even in the cool-down room. It was almost like George was ostracised over here by himself in the naughty corner almost, while Lando and Max, the dudes that take the PJ back and forth from Grand Prix, were fraternising, having that old school banter like they are proper friends. Still, let's see how long that lasts for. Then they get to the press conference proper, the official FIA one. And Lando, again, still emboldened. Now he's Lando 2.0, knows that he has broad enough shoulders, robust enough to fend off Maximilian Verstappen, at least on this occasion. He was asked about how dominant that MCL 3.9 is. Of course, he's going to underplay it now. Of course, he wants to talk about the driving and the risks and the fact that the conditions were changeable. He wants to give rise or give light to the fact that his feat was not insubstantial, that it was a difficult thing that Lando did Australia. And I don't doubt that for a second. But if you're going to give full colour to the story, then you've got to talk about the MCL 3.9. As soon as it became a little bit dry, you saw the gap that Oscar and Lando pulled on Max. In the dry in China, it will get chaotic for McLaren versus the rest, because what they have up their sleeve in terms of lap time is material chat. Lando Norris, though, he says of George Russell's assertion that McLaren could potentially stop developing the 2025 car and focus now on the 2026 one. So dominant are they? So extensive is the lap time delta that they have on the rest of the field. Lando Norris said this. I know George Russell made some comments earlier this week that we can just turn our focus to 2026. If that's their mentality, if that's George's mentality, if that's Mercedes' mentality, wonderful. But that's not the right mentality to have. Sorry, mate. I mean, what are we doing here, chat? This dude, let me say first and foremost, George, he would never, ever dream of talking to Maximilian Verstappen like that. Never. You have more respect and fear for him, because you know Max Verstappen will destroy your life in front of all of them press and media at the official FIA press conference. There's no way that Maximilian Verstappen would tolerate that cheek from you, Lando Norris. But you know that George will have it. Ironic being that George Russell said that he would never stand for any nonsense from anybody. Remember that a couple of weeks ago? He said that the way that he was brought up, deep ingrained in his fabric and his DNA, who he is, he will stand up to bullies and he will never have it from them. His family wouldn't tolerate that sort of behaviour. When Lando said that to King George Russell of King's Lynn, Norfolk, that's not the mentality have. Sorry, mate, we don't have that mentality. We're going to continue developing a 2025 car. George Russell said nothing. Radio silence, no show. No response from George, the man from King's Lynn. And I think that's techier than techie things, chat. People criticise George Russell for saying too much and doing not enough. And I think going into 2025, he needs to fix for that. In the first instance, you might want to punch back if you are punched by one Lando Norris. Yes, they have the quickest car, but that surely gives you more reason now than ever to punch back, King George. What happened to the rhetoric, sir? On the back of Lando Norris destroying King George Russell's all of what he'd been saying, flying directly in the face of it, challenging him in front of the world's press and media. King George Russell, I think it's up to you to bite back, mate. But again, not in saying anything, in doing something at the Chinese Grand Prix. King George Russell of King's Lynn, Norfolk, your move, sir.